So industrialized construction, the way we think about it here at Autodesk, is really the bringing of manufacturing means and methods to the construction industry. The industry has long been trying to figure out how do we increase our productivity, how do we meet the staggering demand for structures and buildings. And really the only way to do that is to look at how we can get to repeatability, how we can get to reusing certain elements of the building across projects. And so industrialized construction is really applying those kinds of practices to get scale and repeatability and efficiencies and optimization and reduce our overall waste of our projects. Allan, do you want to add anything?
I think from my perspective, there's a back story as well, which overlays to the notion of prefab, and not to confuse the two. They certainly are related to each other, but the play that we see is fundamentally towards the elements, the pieces of the puzzle, and all of the participants that make the pieces of the puzzle, and that being the broader picture of industrializing it. And then augmented on top of that is the methodology. So new material, new digital methods, new ways to look, feel, work with data, and look at it from a multi-dimensional perspective rather than seeing it as an extension of prefab, perhaps.
Yeah, and Ryan, is there any research sort of to back this up about why there needs to be such change in the construction and this move to this? Because I guess Autodesk have put a lot of strategy in moving in this direction. I'm guessing it's on the back of some sort of research and evidence out there.
There are a couple of organizations that we follow a lot. McKinsey has some wonderful stuff. There's the next normal, or the new normal in construction, is one paper that we refer to a lot. The Dodge Group does some interesting research in this as well. And you can find lots of people writing about it across the board. So it's not difficult to find industry pundits saying, hey, here's why it's now is the time. Here's why we need to change. Here's sort of the rationale about why it's so important relative to what's happened in the past. So I think there's a lot that's going on there. One of the things from the McKinsey report, and I don't want to accidentally misquote it, but they are seeing a huge shift towards prefabrication and industrialized construction. They're predicting over the next 15 years that'll be a major transformation of spend on prefab and away from more traditional kinds of methods of construction. And that's, really interesting to see that signal and see that looking at over this 15-year, period of time, that they think that that's something that is going to materialize and be really important for us to pay attention to. And then you see it in all kinds of other sort of everyday metrics as well. Different groups report how much of any given building project was prefabricated, and they're monitoring that ratio, because the more prefab that they have in that delivery mechanism, the more that they are manufacturing in new ways in controlled environments, where they have more opportunity to improve quality and get some and lower costs and get more consistency over the course of their projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part that sort of goes hand in glove with that is the safety profile that's being demanded, sustainability. All of the things that start to thread through the story are becoming, more front of mind. And then if you look at it, just from a street level, if you've gone around, and I talk to the Australian market in particular around my neighbourhood in Brisbane, you just look at the amount of waste that's put into skips and the amount of landfill that's generated by, oversupply, mistakes, errors, clutter on sites. All those metrics drive towards this new frontier of, well, we need to step into this space to do it better.
What are I think, Allan, we might have been chatting we're both at a conference that you were speaking at a few weeks ago. I think you might have posed the question. I mean, what is the big hurdles to adoption here? Because if I was to play devil's advocate, 5-6 years ago, the same sort of issues were being pointed to, and some big players had a good crack at it, and they sort of, weren't so successful. So what are the challenges here stopping these moves?
I think that one of the key drivers is the preparation and mindset that's done in the education front. So I think, you see in Victoria with VDAS, the government strategy there to support the education and the digitisation is a great part of that strategy. It's a strength. We need to have, people of your working generation, and let's face it, I'm exiting the businesses that I've worked for and retiring, hopefully. Don't listen to that, Ryan.
Is that news?
And the next phase of the heavy lift has to be done by your generation, and empowering that needs to start in education and then be a pathway for opportunity in digitisation. And once we sow the seeds with that, businesses can then have access to staff who have the skill, have the mandate in some cases, and have the need, their own personal drive to take it there. So I think it's a combination of things. Your question's actually really good in the sense that, what has stopped it? It's attitude. It's in some cases too much of the pie, trying to see the whole apple pie and eat it at one go, instead of sort of baselining some proof of concept, mitigating a lot of the risk by taking small proving steps, and then moving that paradigm forward so that you can actually see the commercial success that comes with it. Because let's face it, not every organization has the tens of millions to forward invest. So you either look at government operations who will support them, or you look at commercial advantage that's then invested in. So I think, my single answer would be education, and I'm a great believer in that we need to set the tone for future.
I think there's two other factors that are pretty important that have long prevented a shift. And one is the way that the traditional business works creates a disincentive to change. People get paid they get paid on, they win the business on low bid, and then they make up their money on all the change orders. And that implies that that every process is ill-defined at the beginning and we'll fix it later. And that's never the most efficient way to do things. I think many organizations are realizing, hey, there is just no substitute for being clearer about what we want to accomplish up front and sticking within those bounds of those defined systems, and sticking to it. I think the second one that I wanted to say is people have thought that we need to define this at the entire building scale. We need to do industrialized construction for everything that's in the building, and that is really a difficult scope of problem to fix. And we really need to start with smaller sets of systems that go in the building. Like fire stairs, like hospital head walls, like some of the MEP stuff, the stuff that's important to every building, but no architect ever becomes an architect to do those specific things. Why can't we make those things more standard with definable variation and leverage that engineering across multiple different projects? Those are two things. And part of the reason we can't do it is Allan's point. We haven't captured the intellectual property, we don't have the domain knowledge, and we haven't trained people in how to do this yet.
And then there's what we've coined cash for chaos, which is the circularity of driving not mutual advantage, but like Ryan referenced, the taking of margin in error. So it's and I'm not in any way, shape, being ultra critical. It's just the way the commercial engine works. But I think, like a lot of other things that have changed during the pandemic, and you look at adoption of systems where we co-share, those needs to co-share now will drive different behaviors and make, hopefully, people realize like, oh, okay. And then the last part that I referenced at the conference was the fact that we as Autodesk have sort of multiple hats that we wear, and our customers don't really know all of those hats yet. And especially in the manufacturing sector, you know, we've known to a lot of people in manufacturing for cars and for, you know, commercial and consumer goods, but we're little known in the construction space as being, you know, the back end of a lot of manufactured product that actually ends up. So we're also trying to close that loop. And as Ryan's pointed out, the whole idea is to not try and boil the ocean immediately, because that's never going to work. So we've set down a pathway where we think we have some key objectives that we can hit. We've got some great milestones to hit, and, you know, encourage everybody to come along to Autodesk University this year. It's in September, it's not later in the year. So just be aware of that if you're doing planning, anybody that's considering coming. But, you know, in forums like that, we can show where we're going, you know, let the market know what we're up to, and most importantly, seek the feedback that we need. You know, we need to do this in the way that we're advocating. We need to be proactive in the space. We need to be listening more. We need to be consultative more. We need to be focused with what our customers want to do. You know, get intimately into understanding what they're trying to do day to day. And with that, we will problem solve for them, because we're well resourced to do that as we journey forward. We're not experts in prefabrication. We have lots of people in our business, like myself and Ryan and others, you know, Amy Marks, who have enormous coverage, but it's the industry that's leading. We are software building platform. You know, what does that look like for our customers? What does it mean for them as they challenge themselves to change? So we're part of this puzzle as well, with the education piece, with the coming on board, the listening, and being there for our customers to grow into it.
When I personally speak to architects about the industrialized construction concept, so where you get the standardized parts and almost turn things into a commodity, so it's huge saving from a manufacturing point of view, but, you know, eyes might glaze over a bit. But you, Ryan, you mentioned something along the lines of special or defined variables. So some things you can actually change within that. So you're not, I guess, you're getting the cake and eating it too. So architects still get that ability to have some flair and you know, make some beautiful buildings. What are some of those definable variables that you see to that you can still play with, but still enable commoditisation in the supply chain?
I think it depends on the system that you are manufacturing for a building. So, you know, somebody who does fire stairs is obviously going to need to know the distance between floors. They're going to need the width. They're going to need materials. They're going to need things like this that are all part of a standard stair assembly that they know how to make. And so the notion of customizable content or customizable elements that go into building is really just saying, hey, as a fabricator or manufacturer, I make an awful lot of this assembly, and I might make 50 different ones and a total of 500 for this particular project, but I'm going to do another 10 other projects. So I'm really making about 5,000 of these things that are pretty similar. Can I treat that more like a product and say, what are the things that I frequently change, and can I plan for those things? And if I make sure that any request I get is within these bounds, that I know how to make that thing, so I can have certainty on the costs. I know what I'm going to wind up delivering. I can give an accurate representation back to the architect or designer to put in their projects, and know that anything that's around it, this thing is not going to change because it has been pre-engineered. That's the concept. So it's difficult to say what those specific elements are, because they vary from system to system and assembly to assembly. But that is the intent of allowing customizable content, and it allows the architect some degrees of freedom, rather than saying, hey, look, I have Legos and I only have the red block that's 2 by 4 and 3 high, and the green block. No, you can say, hey, this block should be 3, or it should be 5, or it should be 7. It could be any of these colors, and then it's more custom for their particular need. So then it makes it also easier for the fabricator. So instead of waiting and reacting to any request, they can say, hey, look, we make a lot of these things. If you want to use our fire stairs, to keep going back to that example, here's the fire stairs, here's the parameters. If you pick anything within these bounds, I know that I can make it for you. And so they don't have to spend any time waiting for the bid and then engineering it and then getting a response back 2 months later, and then having to worry about how to process that after the fact. So they don't have to create 48 separate models for fire stairs that they publish and have to maintain that, and the customer gets the wrong one, and then there's miscommunication around it. We're trying to simplify an awful lot of that.
Yeah, and if you pluck an example, like localized example from the conversations from prefab in Sydney, look at the Sydney fish market example with the brackets that held up the multi-member on the roof. I mean, the development of that is a great example, right, where it's not about constraining architectural practices into a corner and making them, adhere to boxes. It's about bringing that manufacturing process forward into the planning and the pre-work, which is what they did, right, with great success, because they engineered a solution that was mutually worked on, collaboratively arrived at, and questioned by a team of people, which is a great sign. But when you look at the longer play, from a manufacturing point of view, a lot of people who are at the front of the process, planners, architects, etc., apart from the fabrication itself, if they're going to do something at a reasonable volume, they have to understand the constraints that are on the manufacturing supply chain. And those constraints can be the range of materials that they can work with, the capacity of the machines, their scope to be able to produce a particular product. And then when you overlay that onto the likes of generative design and manufacturing, you start to see instances where you have, what material am I going to make? What volume am I going to make? Where am I going to make them? And with whom? Now, in that scenario, with referencing the Mott MacDonald bracket, they might have decided that that's going to be something they'll use again and again, and they might have a different conversation with the manufacturer than the single project, but then again, it might be bespoke. So you end up in this area with the manufacturer that the manufacturer can come back and say, hey, I've got 4 other things that do very similar to this. We've got 80% of those components. Can we do a DFMA, play with this, rearrange these components for purpose, and that fits in with our manufacturing base, so the price will be reasonably good, as opposed to going off on your own without that knowledge, without that help, and coming back with something that you're driving either cost into or drives time into the manufacturing processes of how you'd actually take it to market. So those things are going to become more readily available with digitization. Those communications that we spoke to, and I referenced the COVID stuff, we're now realizing that we can do this. We can do Zoom, we can do digital transfer, we can look at things 3-dimensionally, look at analysis in all sorts of different ways digitally, and go, yeah, actually we're on the right path. Or generative tools in manufacturing let you do thousands of options. They allow you to iterate through and come up with some creative ideas, which you'd never do potentially on your own in the time frame. So you've got to be really careful about how you frame this and how you tell this story, because we, as Autodesk, we deal with the architectural community as much as we deal with the manufacturing community and your film and television. They're all our customers, and we want them to be intertwined. We want the best for them of the toolkit that we provide them. And then what Ryan and I are doing is working towards making those tools better, more accessible.
Mm. Is there any other success stories around Australia or around the world that have got these right? And was there any demonstrable benefits? Sydney Fish Market is a good example where just smart design, which allow that commoditized pieces. Is there any other elements or projects around the world?
Ryan, do you want to talk to the US? And
there's a couple that I think are pretty interesting, and some of them use Autodesk tools, some of them use other tools. But you look at the results that they've been able to achieve. I think Ilke Home in the UK does some really interesting things. They have digitized their residential unit that they have, and in digitizing this and making it so they can automatically compute. They have changed the task of engineering for a new project where it took, a dozen or more engineers months of time to create all the shop drawings and automate it to the point where that happens in less than an hour. So they've taken this huge process that is time intensive, manual, error prone, and squished it down to almost nothing and makes them super responsive. If anything changes in their project, it's just an hour to generate the whole drawing package over again. Why would you wait? Or why wouldn't you update the entire thing rather than try to figure out, okay, well, this drawing changed, and figure out the relationships and what's the fan out of changes you have to propagate through the whole system. I think that's particularly interesting. And another example that I think is pretty compelling is the building system that Max Bogle has implemented for housing and hospitality out of I'm pretty sure they're out of Germany. They are doing some really amazing things with very sophisticated manufacturing in a factory with not just precast concrete, but very complex assemblies that they can ship out as a kit of parts and assemble and accelerate that process. Both of those companies are doing some pretty compelling things.
Mine points back to your backyard, Adam.
Yep.
And my previous experience at Design Make at Lend-Lease, and the team there, some of whom you work with now. I think those early CLT buildings in Australia stand out by miles. Things like Forte, the library in Docklands, etc., the forerunners to the groundwork that was done to prove out in the industry that this was a viable technology stack. But I think one of the things I'm really wanted to call out was we go to the bigger success stories, but if you look organically, look at the types of activities that go on day to day, you see businesses here in Australia, Kavanagh, Fleetwood. You have a number of different organisations who have gone into zones where they're starting to do very creative thinking. And then the substructures in these supply chains are also doing that. So there's a whole stack of low-level, intermediate subcontract businesses that are starting to find the new markets and new space to grow into here. So I think that the bigger projects are easy to reference. I think I just wanted to give kudos to the people who are doing it, day to day, and working at thinking differently within the space that they work and challenging the norm, the Wileys of the world. There's a ton of them, and they're not all in architectural vertical space. There's a whole crossover of people making component pieces for plumbing all the way through to vertical buildings. So there's a lot of stuff happening in Australia. There's a lot of really talented people in Australia, and most importantly, with now the new interest in manufacturing in Australia, there's a great opportunity here to take a lot of the expertise that was possibly once in the automotive industry, and referencing Hickory here, those guys taking different thought streams to a brand new market. There's tons of, Deakin University engineers, QUT engineers. The country's full of opportunity. So I think, we need to be mindful of the two levels and encourage it at both of those levels and everything in between.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something about Australia, New Zealand, and Northern Europe, the Nordics. There's something going on in those particular regions where people are seem to be more willing to push the boundaries and willing to challenge the traditional ways of working, to say, hey, we've got to make this better. And those areas seem to be the areas where we're seeing people do really interesting things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you look at it, and I've been in this space through, channel partners and now at Autodesk and industry, there's no doubt that the caliber of people that I've worked with over my 40 years is just extraordinary. There's some brilliant engineers in this country. There's some brilliant technicians, some amazing people I've worked with. And, again, if we can harness those people and get those people on the same page, they'll do the heavy lifting for you. They're creative enough and capable enough. It's just trying to enable them with new contracts and new ways to think. And it's an industry push. It's not an Autodesk thing. As I referenced before, it's aided and abetted by us, but it's not about us. It's about our customers for sure, and how creative they want to get and how we can go with them as they get creative, how we can support that pathway, which is the exciting bit for us. It's what we get up for.
It's been a fascinating discussion with you both. As we're approaching the end now, what excites you the most about the future of construction in this space going forward? And feel free to have blue sky thinking about what the future might be here. Start with you, Allan, and then end on Ryan.
Look, it'll echo what I've said all through the podcast. I've been involved in education, in and out of it, in TAFE networks, in teaching people computer-aided design and different ways to think in multiple great organisations. And now what I perceive as one of the best I've worked in, which is Autodesk. I see the blue sky as being able to hand this puzzle to all these clever minds, for them to liaise with us, tell us in no uncertain terms where they need to be, and for us to get those great minds that are sitting inside Autodesk all over the world energized and motivated to move it to the next level for the market. And I think we're well and truly on the way. We've got a ton of work to do and a lot of challenges, but I'm really hopeful that this will be a whole dawn of a new way to think, do things, which will create jobs, which will create, families that can rely on people coming home at night.
And yourself?
I think that one of the things that I'm most excited about is, the industry is well documented that it's not very productive, not very efficient, that there's we've talked about the problems lots and lots. I just feel like there's so much opportunity to be better, to do better. And I feel like we're at this inflection point where the industry really is really driving hard and wants to change. And I feel like we're in a unique position to help hopefully influence what that changes into, and hopefully deliver solutions that allow our customers to work way more efficiently. I think that the thing that strikes me the most is the waste. We've got to figure out how to work more efficiently. We've got to figure out how to not throw away 40% of 40% of every project goes in a landfill. If we can make impacts on that, we make the world a better place for everybody. And it just feels like the timing is right for all of these things. And I'm hoping that I can play a small part in pushing that forward.
Yeah, I'd echo that. That nails it. And it's been a life mission for me. You could see it years ago. I've advocated better in the organisations I've worked in all my working career as best as possible. And the world's in a different place now with the sustainability, climate change pressures, and a motion forward to change it. So I think, it is exciting, and we have to start thinking positively and not look at the negativity around it, and use these tools for purpose and get our sleeves rolled up and get on with it.
Mm. Well, I usually ask if people want to find out more about the company. I think everyone listening to this knows a lot about Autodesk, but maybe is there other good things to plug? Perhaps Autodesk University, one of the best construction conferences around the world. Like, speak a little bit about that, or what else Autodesk is up to that people might want to check out.
Yeah, I mean, AU is always an amazing event, whether you can attend it in person or attend virtually. There's a tremendous wealth of resources available there, and if you can't attend it, virtually, there's also all the recordings from previous classes. So it's just a wealth of information that people can have. People know about Autodesk, but in construction, they know about our traditional construction portfolio. They know about BIM, they know about Revit, they know about those offerings. I would encourage people to take a look at the rest of our portfolio, because we do have a very, very strong portfolio in manufacturing, where those tools will help us change the way that we work within construction. So it's worth checking those out and looking at some of the successes and looking for the parallels between the ways that you're working and some of the more complex assemblies that happen in manufacturing. I think, those are really the most probably direct ways to get information that's relevant.
Yeah, and very much like the past information from AUs, a lot of it's as relevant today as it was over a number of years. You can access it through your own login if you're an Autodesk customer. So it's a bit of a gift. And also the other piece that goes, and this is a bit left field, but we have various centers across the world. We have at Pier 9 in San Francisco, we have in Boston, we have robotics and high-end manufacturing. So on our website, there's a link to those facilities, and you can do virtual tours. I'd encourage people to jump on, have a look at that, take a tour, and see what else Autodesk is doing at Pier 9, and the partnerships, and the stuff we're doing with NASA, and the stuff that we're doing in automotive, and the stuff we're doing in film and television. That it's a big operational picture that you can join in and learn more about. So I'd encourage people to use that as a good tool to get on board and understand Autodesk a bit better.